Welcome back, and we are moving into our first conversation for this morning. It's going to be an extended one and hopefully very interesting as well. We have with us on set Gustavo Perrera, who's a social researcher, a consultant, and civil society advocate. We have in the middle Ifasina Efunyemi, who is a history and Caribbean studies teacher at Ecumenical Junior College. And on the end, we have Nigel Encalada, who's the director of the Institute of Social and Cultural Research with NICH. Good morning and welcome, and thank you for being here.
Good morning. Good morning. Pleasure.
So this morning, as we kick off what I'm calling the Independence Week, I think it's a great time to be able to talk about Belize's independence or patriotism. And of course, we're doing so by tackling the theme for this year. And so I want to start off, just let me get a little bit of your own insights. When you reflect on Belize at 36, what does it represent for you? Let's start with the lady.
Belize at 36, I thought of myself at 36 also. I had already accomplished quite a few things, and I believe that our country is in the same position, but still, at that age, you're still young, even though maybe you've completed some level of education, maybe you've gotten as far as the undergraduate level, you might still be deciding, do I want to pursue further education? You might already have an idea where you'd like to own property, but maybe you don't own the property as yet. And so you're still in the middle trying to figure out where can I stabilize myself at that age. And so even though many of us may mature a little bit in our 20s, it is in our 30s that we really start to stabilize. Yes, put down our roots. We become more certain about where we want to go, the direction we want to head. So I think that's where Belize is right now. We are figuring out what direction we're really going to go now.
Yeah, I would like to agree with Ifasina's reflection, but I'd just like to add one perspective, the question of Belize's development and the challenges that come with that. And I always ask myself, where is the leadership coming from to drive this development? And it's slowly setting in, at least in the last couple of years, it has been setting in for me, that we're looking for leadership that exists with our own selves. Right? I've been, as a person who likes history, you understand processes where the role of the elders passing down knowledge to the next generation. But for whatever reason, I think that has not fully happened in Belize for a number of reasons. And so whether it's fair or not, I feel that my generation has been shortchanged by what it is that we inherited in terms of knowledge. And so I've been going through this search, looking for answers from the elders, and many of the elders are willing to share. But it's not something that happens as part of a process of development across the country. So the question is, where does the leadership come from? I'm coming to the conclusion that it's us. We're the generation that must lead the country toward development now.
Gus?
I would kind of just put it in this one phrase, is we're not where we were 36 years ago, but we're not exactly where we would like to be. And I think that we have made great strides, but there are ways to go. And also I think that like everything else, when we do our plans, like when we develop strategic plans, we always make sure to include in it what are some of the contingencies, the risks and the threats, what can derail your plans. And sometimes emerging issues are not things that you had even envisioned, right? And sometimes we are broadsided, even in our personal lives. Sometimes we have adversities that we would never have imagined would come up. So it's the same thing, right? That there are emerging issues that present, great challenges for us as a country. But as I said, we have come a long way,
Yeah.
but there are ways to go.
That does sound very reminiscent of your 30s, doesn't it? But I want to ask Nigel a specific question first, because I think one of the things that we often hear about is the fact that Belize attained its independence without what people call a war or a battle, that we were able to have a group, an individual with a vision of attaining independence, and there was more of a diplomatic process in being able to get us there. Lots of lobbying, of course. How that has shaped us as a people and how it has shaped our identity. It also is very commonly referenced to the fact that we moved from a colonial system and somehow made a decision to be independent and have been trying to figure out our way from that point forward. What would you say to that, to those specific issues, how it helps to shape us, or how it does shape us in who we are today?
I think that the idea or the fact that we were able to lobby internationally through the efforts of key individuals to acquire independence is a historical fact and a skill that is highly valued in the modern world. Small countries like ours, we cannot use weapons and so on to resolve issues. We have to use diplomacy and negotiation and so on. And from my experience, what I've seen, Belize does have a few skilled individuals in this area. The question as to whether or not they're being fully utilized is another matter. So today you find that negotiation plays out even in the psychology. We hear the peaceful constructive revolution. So people, for example, especially on social media with all the issues that arise with development and corruption and so on, people are looking for a revolution, they're looking for bloodshed, but it's not a part of the character of the country. So people are saying, however, it's not to say that it might not be at some point in the future, depending on the type and degree of injustice and corruption that emerges. But it is not part of our character. A part of our character in the multicultural society has developed is one of negotiation. Yes, there are underlying prejudices and so on, but it's not a part of our character to be engaged in open conflict with each other.
But isn't there two ways that one can choose to look at exactly what you're saying, in the sense that, as Marlene indicated earlier, the fact that we did not sort of fight for our independence, quote unquote, one could easily say, well, and people are blasé about everything and they're not really serious. That's one way of looking at it.
Yeah.
But then it takes a sense of maturity as well to be able to negotiate and be able to take the diplomatic route in terms of dealing with issues.
Yes.
So I'm saying it's a matter of perspective.
Right. That is true. That is true. But you know, one of the common misconceptions about bloodshed and revolution, if you want to use that, is that it creates a better society. Most times it does not. It just fosters more violence. And
El Salvador, for instance.
Yes, and you resort to violence every time there is an issue. And then there is just a quick band-aid thing that is done. But it never fully makes your society a better place from what I've seen. Right? So we have this, we say, oh, in such and such country, they may have done the burn up this and they broke up that and so on. That doesn't lead to a better society. It just empowers that psychology of more violence. That is just my understanding.
And it doesn't seem to be the people that we are. You know, Ifa and Gus, you guys can jump in at any point with the conversation. And I think going back to the independence, how Belize attained its independence, one of the things we have to be very clear about is that there were persons who felt that we were not ready for independence. In fact, we were joined by, I believe it was the foreign minister, yes, I'm sorry, when he spoke about not seeing it as the best time then, but glad the decision was made and we were able to attain our independence. But if I am to reflect on what happened in history, it showed one very important thing, that leadership and a leader with vision is extremely important.
Yes.
And whether or not you will align yourself with someone who is pro a particular movement or against it, the Belizean people long for persons with vision.
I agree with that, Marlene, that I believe that the vision to attain independence was a compelling vision. I think it was a vision that instilled in the Belizean people, right, a whole spirit of unity and identity and national identity to become a nation. I believe that after independence, though, there has not been another compelling vision that has been able to rally, around which people could rally and around which, because I think it was John Maxwell who says, compelling vision attracts resources. No, people put resources where the vision is, right? And we have, I don't think that we have come up with another compelling vision that has been able to mobilize the country the way maybe the vision of attaining independence did. No, having said that, I just want to mention also that I think an assessment was done, 30-year retrospect was done on Belize 5 years ago, and one of the achievements cited, or milestones, or in the context of this year's theme, Triumph, was the fact that we have not gone the way that other countries have gone, which is war. Although we have this emerging challenge, no, it's not emerging, actually it's becoming a greater challenge, and that is the issue of crime and violence. No? But certainly we have not gone the route of some of our Central American neighbors where civil unrest, war, and so on is concerned. No? So I believe that although we have maybe mapped strategic directions, we have not really come up with a compelling vision of where we want to be as a country beyond 2020, 2030.
Beyond 2017 at this
Well,
point.
it seems as if though we are from one extreme to the other extreme. We haven't found that middle ground. So it's just like if you're on the battlefield of a school ground and dealing with a bully, for example, and there are those two options, the option of being aggressive and the option of being passive. And we seem to be more on the side of being passive, and so the onlookers might say, we soft.
Well, that's what I was saying.
You know, well, what's up with us? When you look at everywhere else, people are more aggressive. They take action. Now, is that necessarily a bad thing that we have not taken action? That is something now we need to reflect on as a nation. Is do we now need to woman up, you know, and take a stand and show our strength. That strength doesn't have to involve now just being reactive, but a disciplined response as opposed to a reaction.
I'm so glad you pointed that out because I wanted to be very clear in what we're saying. And we say it so casually, you know, maybe Gus has some great research he can share on that, but we always talk about how Belizeans are passive, how we don't necessarily focus on issues for a very long time. We're great at complaining about it or saying that we don't like it, usually behind the computer where we're more courageous online. But we don't take action. But action doesn't mean aggression. And I think, you know, where we've had campaigns for persons to come forward and help, whether it was raising money for rangers in the Chiquibu because everybody was upset of what was happening there, or to perhaps be called to protest or to speak out against something, sign a petition, there seems to be a disconnect between recognizing that saying it's wrong is the first step, naming the issue, but the second step comes with doing something. And I don't know where we can perhaps attempt to bring a solution to this problem. And, you know, it's not just about political issues, it's neighborhood watch in your area where you have a lot of crime.
Well, maybe part of the problem is how we have been socialized. So let's say you're as a child, I'm going to always be juxtaposing growing up as a person and then growing up as a nation. If you seem to be this aggressive, or, you know, you're going to stand up for yourself kind of child, but you're in an environment that the necessity is there, it seems, to tame you, then what happens is that gets suppressed. That trait gets suppressed in the way that the child is socialized. And so that child now ceases to be aggressive or even assertive because they're tamed. That's not the way you're supposed to operate. And I think that's what has happened to Belize, because in the way that we have trained our citizens, they don't know how to be proactive because they haven't been taught to be proactive. They've been taught to be passive, to just accept what's going on and not rock the boat too much. And that has been part of our downfall as a nation.
From the children must be seen and not heard movement?
Yes.
I think partly too, there has been a disconnect between two generations. I think that the younger generation are to some extent indifferent about a lot of the issues, not because they're not concerned about the issues and don't want to do anything about it, but because they are disillusioned with the way that our political system has worked for the country, right? And by extension for them. And I think that in their eyes there needs to be a complete overhaul, right, of the whole way that we practice and execute our politics, no? Because really and truly, if we look at one of our greatest challenges, which is that of poverty and hunger, crime and violence, one of the first things, again, you will see is that the wealth of the country is concentrated in the hands of a few, political and financial wealth, right? And the system exacerbates that situation, right? So people are disengaged, right? And I guess in a way it's also saying that a lot of what we have achieved would not have been possible if there weren't civil society and non-governmental organizations who have played very, very important role. No? Of course, with the support also of bilaterals and multilaterals who have put in support financially and programmatically. You know? So it has to be that partnership, public, private, and the civil society.
Let's go back a bit. I'm glad that you raised that as a point. I'm in my mid-30s. So I'm just about...
You can say your age.
You're as old as Belize.
I like the juxtaposition that Ifasina keeps making between growing up as an individual and growing up as a nation, right? My generation, I'm trying to kind of recall in my mind if there was ever a point in time where someone actually stood out from my generation. And I think when you look at, let's say, our Belizean heroes,
Right.
these are individuals from
30s,
previous
40s.
generations,
30s,
not
40s,
necessarily those that are growing up among us right now. And I think that speaks to what Gustavo is saying, that maybe this generation is disconnected from what that struggle is, so to speak, such that there hasn't been someone that has risen out of this, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, something that stands out among us.
Or just someone more relatable. And we don't mean, this is all just a conversation, but what we have been doing, I see, is more focusing on trying to educate people of these historical persons versus perhaps identifying modern day heroes who have been contributing towards the development of the country. I know this is right up your alley, and this was not an allegation nor plan.
No. I think Mr. Perrera made mention earlier of the politics, and one of the realities is that the way politics is done, it has infiltrated every aspect of life. Media is aligned with certain political movements and persons. Civil society is aligned. Now there is even perception of the church having alignments, perception of individuals having alignments. So you see at the grassroots level, you do have a few people who you can admire, but you're unable to create larger movements because of the lack of resources, and independent-minded individuals with resources And everyone is so dependent on certain systems within the country that it is the main pacifist, it is the main thing that pacifies the society. So what will happen from a historical perspective, this is just what I looking to the future, what can possibly happen unless civil society and the civil society has played a great role. And you can point to some of the constitutional amendments, you can point to the environment being one of the major issues that civil society has been able to deal with. But what will happen in the future unless there is more checks and balances, effective checks and balances, the society will eventually crumble into more and more chaos. And it is from that chaos that individuals rise. It is just a thing from history. Certain situations force people, whether they want to or not, into situations. Very few people go into this kind of thing without there being some catalyst.
Yeah.
You think about all the people in the past.
You know, and key to mention in this conversation, and while we have spoken about Belizeans being very passive, it's not all the time. You know, we go back to heads of agreement, which I still think we have not educated Belizeans enough about, and maybe we could have that conversation at another point, but even other civil unrests that have taken place, or unions, for example, have staged mass protests, peaceful protests, in being able to attain certain issues, certain achievements. When the unions, when the teachers sat out of school for 11 days, potentially risking their own livelihoods, to fight against corruption, that was action as well. You know, in 2005, which I think is perhaps the only one that people tend to remember, there were peaceful protests before it disintegrated into the riots. And I want to bring Gus here, because Gus, you were at that time at SPARE, which was very active, conducting polls and really getting the pulse of the people as to how they felt about the issues that were taking place then when it came to corruption. How much do you feel that civil societies, perhaps that look exclusively at governance, are needed at this point in time?
I think very much so, and I think that I think an organization like SPARE actually has an important role to play even now, no? Because the whole issue of governance is very, very critical. Considering, right, that one of our, again, greater challenges going forward is that of an unsustainable debt burden, right? And when you look at debt, right, you're talking about accountability to begin with, no? Because that's the biggest area of accountability to your populace, right, is how our monies are used, right? And again, going back to that 30-year retrospect that was done, although it reflected in high GDP growth, the debt burden really increased because of expansionary spending, as it is referred to now, meaning that there was spending, but it was not productive. It wasn't really generating returns. No, it was more, and I think we have kind of done that again recently. No, we've done a lot of spending based on borrowing, but we have not necessarily grown people, so to speak. We have not grown people, right? And I think that probably has something to do with again, crime and violence, because when you look at indigent poverty in Belize as a country, indigent poverty is higher in Toledo, Corozal, and then Stan Creek, in that order, no? And then Orange Walk. So why aren't we seeing the levels of crime and violence in those areas where there's real indigent poverty, but we're seeing it in Belize City? I think land has to do something with it. Land and agriculture. People might be poor, but they have land that they could live off.
That's right.
In Belize City, there's no land.
That's right.
And then there's no employment, right? Yes, there are programs, and programs are very good to get people involved, but if they're not earning money
On a sustained basis.
right, what are the options? And I believe that's where the whole issue of drugs comes in, and that provides a way for many to
have an
earn
income.
money, right? But it has some serious repercussions for society, because it undermines, or it could potentially undermine all the gains that we have made, because again, tourism, which has been one of the fastest growing sector, in fact it accounts for I think 51% of the employment force, and about 45% of GDP. I saw you all talking this morning, I heard you all talking this morning about the incident in San Pedro. It takes something like that and your tourists stop coming. You're talking about 51% of your employed population in jeopardy, So I think that the role of ASPARE or any other organization that focuses on governance is important, right? And I think that that the government should give ear and voice to these organizations, because that's the role that civil society is there to play, And I think the reason why maybe some organizations or some people tend to go quiet, and I could maybe tap myself a little, is that everybody wants to put you into a political box, right?
Yes.
And then everybody wants to attach a motive to that political box, right?
Yes.
And once they can do that, then the saying comes up, just give it 2 weeks and people forget. Just give it 2 weeks, right?
Blow over
A big scandal, but give it 2 weeks and people will forget. Why? Because people feel a sense of futility, right? Because we feel like we can't change anything, right?
So let me
And we're
ask,
so easily distracted. I tell people, look at the incident with the Queen of the Bay. As bad as it was, we were discussing major issues before that, and we're still talking about two queens being crowned as the most monumental issue in this country as we're going to independence. And I'm not saying it wasn't horrible, but they're bigger fish to fry.
Yes.
let me put this out there. I'm listening to Gustavo, and one question comes to mind, and I would want for the three of you guys to chime in with a response. Do you guys believe that politics, in a sense, has stymied the growth of Belize as a country? We're living in a time where everything is political. You make one step here, it is criticized based on the way we see things from that political perspective. Do you believe that that has, in some sense, stunted our growth?
It's again about socialization. And if you watch what was the platform or foundation for our nationalist movement was the labor movement. And at that time, it was regular folks. So people who were being affected by the issues, and Antonio Sobranes Gomez was being affected by the issues, and he went and spoke to other people that were being affected by the issues. So there was a sense of ownership. Now here come the educated elite who came and took full advantage of all of that energy and that vibrance to then change the agenda. And the agenda became, let's become independent. Let's be the one in control of our country's development. But here also is what happened, because I propose a theory that the mass migration of Belizeans out of this country in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that's the effect we're feeling now, right at this moment. Because that's why our generation doesn't have that star.
That connection.
They left. They left. And so the younger generation, you have all the negative social ills that are the direct result of the mass migration of our productive and reproductive age group, and particularly our Afro-descendants, because it's mostly Afro-descendants that left. And they left because they did not feel welcomed in Belize. They did not feel like they could maximize their potential in this country. And it was political. It was political. Now, a lot of things are political, and we have to distinguish party politics from governance and leadership and deciding how are we going to be led. And the thing is, we have politicians and politicians that have benefited from the ignorance of our population. So they have this culture that they've created since throughout the nationalist movement, and they capitalize on that. That's what they benefit from. So they don't want a population that is highly educated, because a highly educated population will make very different decisions going to the polls and will not accept $50, and they will not accept a pantry system, and they will not accept just a minor infrastructural development here or empty promises. So we have that issue now to address as a nation, where it comes to the civic education of our population, so that they can make better decisions politically for this country.
Well said.
My take on that is that I think my good friend Henry Gordon used to always say the purpose of political parties is to win elections, and I think that the focus has always been on winning elections. But I also want to say that it is the office, right, that brings honor to the elected official. It is not the elected official that brings the honor to the office, right? And I admire European governments, right? Because whenever any member of government believes that they have brought their office into potential dishonor, they resign. Nobody has to ask them to resign. They resign voluntarily because they must preserve the honor of office.
At the first hint of a scandal.
Right, and I think that we have done the opposite, right? We have actually reached a place where even if you have been involved in a scandal, but you can win the election in your constituency, you are good to go, right? And where's the honor in the office, right? Where's the honor in the office, right? And I think that, I don't know, maybe again, civil society has to come back and say, look, we need to set up some kind of system to make sure that the honor of the offices that are filled are preserved, no?
You know, when I have, go ahead.
I just want, that observation is something I always think about too, because the checks and balances, and I sometimes you get a pessimistic view of things, because I believe that no matter what system you have, unless a person comes with a certain level of integrity, it doesn't matter, because they will find loopholes and so on. So I don't think it's the system so much. I think it's the people and how, going to something that Ifasina said, how we are socialized. We are taught to think, we're made to think that doing illegal things is okay, you can overlook it and so on. And that is terrible. I mean, you know, but
Can I throw in a little idea here? And that's where I spoke about coming from a colonial system. Because I think oftentimes people see authority figures and persons who've been elected to an office as perhaps, in fact, being above the law, because it has been in practice. And we feel or we behave like there is nothing we can do because we haven't seen anything done. And you know, conversation with children are so telling. When you start to hear children saying, well, I want to be a minister driver because that make a lot of money, or I want to be a politician, or the head of a gang because that's also a very powerful position, and these are the things that they aspire to, which I have heard teachers reflect to me already, then the messages that have already infiltrated these young minds are already a wrong perception. But I want to go back to that, because it's almost like we sit and we accept what is going on. For two reasons. One is the idea I just threw out. The second is the fear of partisan politics. And we have to be very clear. Politics is not a bad word. It's the partisanship. It's the red or blue that you must be a part of. And in this country, the Constitution allows for freedom of association. There is nothing wrong if you want to put on your red shirt or your blue shirt and devote yourself to a political party until the day you die. But there are also those of us who choose not to align ourselves, and in having a voice for or against a party or an administration, it doesn't automatically typecast you with the opposition or the other side. So could it be a combination of both? Maybe this perception of what authority is versus us regular folks, and also the fear of being typecasted into either one of the political parties.
Well, that goes to the question that Isani asked earlier about what politics has done to the society.
Partisan politics.
Partisan, yeah. And there has been some strides made, you know. More when you look at the statistics, more people being educated and so on, larger investments. Like right now, like when we're looking at the early $17 million in 1981, now you're looking at a quarter of the country's budget in education, right? But here is the thing now. While those strides have been made, there's also been, going back to something God said, a concentration of the wealth, same time. So we do this, but ignore this. And that is the injustice that exists, right? Now, the issue now on a macro level, how do we, what is the agenda, what is the vision for Belize now? One of the things that the dangers with statistics is when we talk about being indigent and so on, is that and I'm coming from a cultural perspective now, when we think about wealth, we say, oh, everybody want to live in a cement house and got 2 vehicles and so on, but that is not necessarily the case in Belize. Because of the rural-urban dynamic, because of the customary way of life of certain groups, what we really need is a homegrown approach to development, where you take the same landed groups and you support initiatives for sustainable tourism, the cacao, the peanuts, the agriculture, and so on. But you need a sustained effort. You have people who have championed during the course of their time in leadership. They champion certain things. And as soon as they are removed, the thing falls, and you see it in cycles. Then you look at it, you look at because this agriculture thing, not today, I just to give you an idea of the importance of agriculture. You know, these are not today, there have been initiatives over time, but every time it disappears from the scene and then it reemerges, but it all has, I don't know why it is, but there is no sustainable approach to the development, and it relies on individual leadership for whatever reason. Immigration, another factor. You have a lot of highly educated Belizeans in all sorts of fields around the world, but here we say around the world.
Yes.
Right?
And that is the aspiration of young people now. We had a session with high schoolers, and on national television, they said that their friends are aspiring to further their education and continue to work outside of Belize, not because they don't want a change in Belize, and I'm hoping, I think I almost have memorized what they said, but because Belize doesn't want to change. And those are teenagers.
You're looking at an issue of brain
brilliant
drain.
children.
Right? It's a matter of brain drain. Where, as a parent, for instance, my daughter tells me, well, Daddy, I know I go to high school at Belize. I just going as far as standard 6, and then she aspires to go to the States. That has been her dream. But the role then is to be able to explain to her that Belize is very much a good country that has all of these other things to offer right here. A lot of us go and we get educated abroad, and then we realize, well, might as well as stay at States and work there. So it speaks to you, what you said, all of these experts in respective areas of industry and what have you, they have an idea and an opinion from afar, but they don't come and implement it in Belize where it's necessary.
But sometimes they can't. There's this thing called structural unemployment. It means that they're acquiring skills that can't be utilized in the current economy, in the way the Belize is designed. So this is why a national agenda that cuts across governments is important. It's an ideal. I understand countries like Costa Rica, they have done it, where you have a national agenda. So whoever comes in, it doesn't matter. You stay the course. You try and put your best foot forward along that. So then what it does, you know then that even the education system will be targeting and developing individuals who can come and continue to develop the particular sectors you want to develop. So one of the best examples in Belize that's working is tourism. But tourism is also a very vulnerable sector. Just look at the hurricanes and so on, right? So, but there are other areas that, and one of them is the issue of agriculture and the ownership of our own resources. One of the major contributors to poverty in Belize is the fact that we don't own land. Coastal land has the highest value. There was a study that was done, and I think I've said it before, which shows that over 80% of coastal land are foreign owned. It's not that we have anything against foreigners, but the Belizeans who own those lands need to empower themselves and be empowered in order to develop those resources.
Look at Saint-Bite, for instance.
Thank you.
Look at Saint-Bite.
Thank you.
Saint-Bite being one of the Garifuna villages, right? Growing up as a child, when I looked at Hopkins and I looked at Saint-Bite, I said, wow, these are 2 coastal Garifuna communities, prime real estate.
Right.
when you look at what has happened, it's sort of a gentrification.
Yes.
Where
It is. It's not sort of.
it is a gentrification, where the Garinagu people of those respective communities sell their land to the foreigners. So you have prime real estate now being held by foreign entities, and then maybe for the $80,000 or the $100,000, now they have to move behind the village in areas that are not as ideal as how they had it initially.
And that were higher in value.
But I have to go back again to socialization. This lack of appreciation for Belize is not accidental. This deliberately happened. That within the education system, we were taught not to appreciate the land. We were taught not to pursue farming or see farming as something great, appreciating where we're located as this is a blessing, this is a gift, this belongs to us. We were made to feel like out there is where it's happening, not here. That's where the land and that's where the milk and honey is, not here. That did not happen by accident. So now, even now, I don't know what teachers are telling their students today. I don't know what parents are telling their children today. I know what my mother told me when I was growing up, and I know what I heard in the classroom, why I love Belize. And so what I tell my students is I could be anywhere in the world. I love this country. That's why I am here. I don't want you to be stuck here, because when you have too many people stuck, and that's a lot of us are stuck here. Remember, the resources are not equally distributed. So we're stuck here. So it's not a good feeling. It's very negative. It's you're bitter, you're upset, you feel hopeless. There's all kind of negative things. So all of that is happening in
And
the
let me
society.
ask you this. What are your students saying back to you?
Well, many times when I'm saying these things, they are in shock. The initial response is, what is she talking about? Like, where is this coming from? Because they had never heard that before. Nobody is saying to them, stay home, go out there, get your education, go and be exposed, learn what's going on in the world, but come home. Bring back those skills here. This is your country. It can only be developed with you. And if you don't stay or you don't come back, somebody else is going to come and take your place. That's what I keep saying to my students. So I ask them, how many of you have access to land? Your parents own the land, or they raise their hand. I say, please, don't sell it, don't sell it, don't sell it. Hold on to this. Yes, hold on to this. Hold on to your piece of Belize. You have the power to make a change. I wish more people would be telling them that. They need to be hearing that over and over and over again.
So let me ask this then. Sorry, go
I
ahead.
just want to say we can't underestimate the power of land, right? If we look at when the first wave of migrants came to Belize back in the 70s as a result of the civil unrest, civil war in, I think it was El Salvador.
El Salvador,
for all intents and purposes, they came with nothing. I mean, they came basically, if you want to call it, indigent poor, that's how they came. But they got land.
They ran for their life.
Yeah, they got land. And they have actually been incrementally becoming an economic and political power in Belize, because they have a say, they have voice, they are participating in our systems, but their land is productive, so they're growing vegetables and stuff like that. And if you look at how the areas have been transformed over the years, from the little thatch houses to cement buildings, you could see
and
how
larger and larger farms.
Right, you could see how these people's lives, the quality of life has improved over time, right? Again, in Belize City, we have not been able to do the same, right? Why? No land, right? The other thing I wanted to say was, and it slipped my mind, that's something that she was talking about. Our geographical realities. We have to accept our geographical realities, right? Because if we want our people to stay and become everything that they want to become, we will not be able to do it just being isolated as a country. Why? Because we have a lot of limitations. One, we're a consumption-driven country. We have very limited exports. Our population is too small, so we won't attract the big investments that will produce the manufacturing, right? So we have to find a way to assimilate into the economic systems of our neighboring countries, but we have to overcome some of, I don't know whether they're biases or whether they're just, maybe we need to make the adjustments now, but we need to begin to realize that we have to find some way to integrate into those systems. And I guess the first place to start would be like SICA, no?
Yes.
Is to begin to integrate into those systems.
Okay, we're going to put a pause and take a break. And when we come back, we will resume our conversation and, of course, definitely take a focus on the way forward. All right? That's coming up after the break. Stay tuned.
If you're looking for low-cost television advertising, have we got a deal for you? Advertise on Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds is one of the most effective methods for introducing yourself and your business to the community. Use our Daily Classifieds to recruit employees, promote specials, promote your products or services, promote a business opportunity, increase traffic to your website, and advertise items you have for sale. Let us help you save valuable time and money. Call us today at 223-0146 or visit us at our offices on Pony Drive to discuss how we can help your business grow affordably. Channel 5's Daily Classifieds. Advertise today.
For over 20 years, Great Belize Television, Channel 5, has been the leader in award-winning local programming. We have also produced some of the best video commercials, documentaries, and live events for clients countrywide. And we continue to offer high-quality production services to maximize your advertising needs for your business or organization. From concept to completion, let us help you achieve your marketing goal by producing your commercial, documentary, graphic animation, live event, or even designing your website. Using state-of-the-art equipment and experienced personnel, we can make your ideas come alive. For more information, come see us on Coney Drive or give us a call at 223-0146 or 223-7781 or email us at gbtv@vtl.net. Great Belize Productions, making great television in Belize.
And welcome back. Of course, we're continuing our conversation this morning, looking at Belize at 36. And once again, we're talking about the theme for this year: confronting challenges, celebrating triumphs, and renewing our resolve. So I think we took quite some time looking at the number of challenges, and there are many more that we could have highlighted this morning. So I like to say on the show, sometimes it's hard to find a silver lining, and in those times, at least find a silver thread, right? So where we have a society that often times feels so hopeless and so helpless, what would you say are some of the areas that we must perhaps celebrate, where we have made achievements, and at 36 that we can be proud of?
Marlene and Isani, putting into context, right, how social progress or well-being is measured, the universally accepted framework are the MDGs, right? Mm-hmm. And when you look at the MDGs and the recent mix survey, the multiple indicators cluster survey, if we look at the MDGs though specifically, and we look at the baselines from 1990, and I imagine those indicators would have been lower before 1990. I think we have really made a lot of strides, good strides, right? And as I mentioned earlier, that has a lot to do with the role of civil society in that. For example, while there are ways to go, for example, with gender equality and women empowerment, there have been good work that has been done by the National Women's Commission, the Women Issues Network, the work that...
HOA.
Right. And so, you know, the Women in Politics project, while it has not produced the number of women in parliament, it has certainly created awareness. And it is really showing that the the approach to integrating into the political system needs some adjustment, no? But certainly, when you look at in the health area, the fact that the country has been able to arrest and reverse the HIV epidemic is also an achievement. The fact that we've been able to reduce infant and child mortality
and maternal
compared to where it was in 1990. We've come a long way, right? Again, in terms of the environment, we're doing well. We could do more, but we're doing well. There are vulnerabilities there, the climate change, the vulnerability to natural disasters. But again, right, the overarching challenges, crime, violence, the debt, right? Because the debt burden, we have gotten some reprieve because we've been able to push it back to 2038, but maybe that's good for us. But how about our children, right? And what are the plans 20 years from now to not have to find ourselves in a situation where we want to push it back to 2058, you know what I mean? So those things, need but I think we've made strides, and the role of a lot of organizations, I mean, I know that with the child mortality, the baby-friendly hospital, you have, in terms of poverty, there's been efforts to boost the conditional cash transfer. It's limited in its capacity, but still it's been a model program, no? So there have been other programs that have done well, no?
I believe that where there is underdevelopment, there is opportunity, and Belize is in that position, and it's just a matter of seeing those opportunities, because they're there, and our neighbors who have sought refuge in our country have shown us that they have come from very difficult circumstances, and they have seen and been able to take full advantage of what we have available here. But we have not been able to see that or benefit from that. So that is now where we need to go, is looking at ourselves at 36 and seeing, I have this pimple here, I have this issue here, I have that issue here. Some of this is part of who I am, but some of this, if I change my diet, if I do certain things, I can have a cleaner face, and it can look like this for a much longer time. So I need to make some changes personally. That's where we're at as a nation. Now, change is not something that is easy, and a lot of people are comfortable, especially if they're in the privileged positions. They don't want to change that situation. They would like for it to remain that way. But if we all look at where we're at right now as a nation, we can't all continue to behave like what's going on Southside Belize City or Southside Belize period isn't going to affect us individually at some point. So we're all responsible for making that change that will make this entire nation grow. Then we will eliminate some of the poverty, we will eliminate the crime and so on, because we have the resources. It's not impossible to ensure that everybody in Belize is properly educated, that everybody in Belize has access to adequate and excellent healthcare services. That's not impossible, that everybody's basic needs are met. We can do that. We can actually afford to do that. Do we have the will to do it? There is the problem for us.
Yeah, going forward, I want to take a cultural perspective on it. The importance of culture has come to the forefront in my mind, especially in the area of tourism. All of Belize's tourism product is a cultural product when you look at it. So culture, and so along those same lines then, there's some cultural traits within Belize that need to be harnessed in order to develop a homegrown approach to sustainable development. And so it means then, on one hand, developing a land policy where there is access and a support for agricultural and other types of production within the country. We don't have to be, we have to think on two levels: supporting a local economy, and then on the other hand, finding that balance to participate in the global economy in terms of trade and so on. one of the assets that is now increased is the fact that we're required now to be bilingual. It's a requirement in the sense that geographically where we are. And that is something that we can take advantage of in Belize. We have not fully yet developed the skill to create that linkage between Central America and the Caribbean, but it's something that we talk about all the time, but we have not yet fully been able to do that. In terms of education, developing a strategy for education, because yes, there is the IT vet movement and so on, no, but the question is, I've not yet heard how that is aligned to a national development agenda, right? So if that is it, then what is the national development agenda? So you want alignment. Yeah. But the land thing is critical. People who are landed can have resource, then are put in a position. But another key thing, and it has been a debate since independence, the issue of privatization versus public ownership of assets. Yeah. One of the things, especially in the cultural sector, we realized that at first there was this approach where, okay, you say you provide support here and there, and then you go do your thing. Within 5 years, you're supposed to be able to do your thing. We have come to the conclusion within niche that you cannot abandon groups and that are trying to, in terms of development. So what you need actually is a sustained partnership, public-private partnership. It needs constant support and sustenance. And the public sector has that responsibility. It's built into their work. And so that is something that must be sustained. And to ensure the incremental development as human capacities are developed. That's the other and final area. Developing the human capacity in every area. In journalism, in culture, in economics, in finance. Because there are some areas we have to constantly import consultants to do this, that, and the other. And when we, in fact, can and should be doing it on our own because it's our reality, and so on. So capacity building is a major thing.
I agree with what you're saying, and in a sense, I'd play devil's advocate for the sole purpose of shining or shedding light on another aspect of what you're saying. While building human capacity is indeed arguably the most important of everything that you laid out just now, the fact is that as Belizeans, a majority of us are doing so individually, in a sense. We're building ourselves through education, through expertise, amassing our own wealth and our resources, etc. The counterpoint, however, is the fact that we still have this cultural mentality where we're saying that what is Belizean and what is homegrown perhaps isn't good enough or isn't necessarily the standard as we would want it to be. So we end up bringing in the consultants from outside because we don't trust in the work that our fellow Belizeans who are equally as knowledgeable and educated in those respective areas can do for us.
Right. But you see the thing, Isani, it goes back to a thing I mentioned earlier. You need a strategy that applies across years and people. So if you can inculcate that in a generation, then the next generation stands to gain from that. So the buy Belize, build Belize thing that has been, you see spurts and so on. It needs a sustain. A major thing, media. Once you Belizeanize the media fully, well, it's a balance because you can't do that because television is a reality. But if we Belizeanize our programming and people, we see ourselves and so on, right? And that is a true fact. That is a true thing.
We agree with you. But if you know how difficult it is to source funding for local programming, I would love to have 10 programs on for the day. But
and that's good. But you see, this is why I'm talking about public-private. In every sector, that's I would advocate for that being the model. No, but it takes people of integrity and vision. Because if we do it to serve our own interests, then that becomes, and I mean across the board, right? Across the board, right?
So, we always talk about grassroots movement. And we talk about the bottom-up approach or the top to the bottom. We know change is needed in the country. We know that where we have made some progress, there is much more left to be put in place. We're not as developed as we know we can be. We are not as progressive as we wish we would be. And we are slowly and surely hearing from our younger generation that their aspirations are to get out. Where do you feel that if we were to start a campaign, if we were to start to see some particular change begin, where does it need to happen? Do we need new leadership, a revolutionary to start, one young person to come forward and say, I have a vision, follow me? Or do we need people in this society to somehow turn on one light bulb and perhaps start doing things differently? Where do you see the most effective change coming from? And this is obviously opinion based.
Right, right.
But we've all, as we've said during the break, reflected on this issue day in, day out, as we hear what's happening in the country.
I'd say it's not one or the other, but both. I'm a proponent of that. You know, it's a whole circle. It's a lot of things that need to happen, and simultaneously. There is no one way to solve this. And I envision that because I've thought of myself in this way as an advocate, because I'm one of those people who I believe that I can do something. I believe I can do something. And I'd like everybody to believe that and then do something. Believe that you can do something and then do something. And I see myself, if I only could, when I look at what happens in Belize City, if I only could hang out with the guys on the block and just have a conversation with them, find out what they're thinking, and let them know what I know. Because then their thinking would change, because then now they know what I know. And people think one way because that's all they know until they know something else. So go out and talk to I'm thinking if all of us could be in the living room of every household, just talking to people, exposing them to new information and new perspectives. That's how revolutions have been successful, is because all the people started to see the same vision and feel it and believe it and want it for themselves. And then they were proactive thereafter.
It's a buy-in.
So getting people to see this new vision, to want something different for themselves, to want more than that little space that they've subjected themselves to, and therefore wanting more for Belize than what we've subjected ourselves to. And we don't have to have this huge New York City. We don't need that, because at the end of the day, it's not sustainable.
That's right.
We can see the beautiful things that we have in Belize and maintain that. So that's the opportunity for us, because since we are not developed, we could decide how we want to be developed, and we don't have to imitate what we've seen and also then repeat the errors, the mistakes that other nations have made, because we can look at what they've done critically and pick from it. Okay, I like that in Finland, this is the way their education system is set up, and they're not bombarding the children with a whole heap of testings and all of that. They're actually making them feel like human beings. They don't have special schools for special children. Everybody has the same quality education. Why not have that kind of education system? Because we need those kinds of citizens to develop this nation. So look around, be critical, do our research, learn the lessons from others. That's the wise thing to do in your 30s, is to find out what did the people in their 50s, 60s, 70s do, what was good and what was not so good.
And what will work for me and what won't.
That's right.
I'm a proponent of charting one's own course, right? Such that we're in our mid-30s, Belize at 36. It's a matter of creating an identity that stands out. It's a matter of finding oneself, as you started off with the initial conversation. Because rightfully, someone who is in their mid-30s is, or should be,
you already know,
grounding him or herself so that once they become established, they're able to be more productive.
Right.
They're able to give back.
Yes.
They're able to educate and enlighten in order to bring others
Yes,
on board
they're
as well.
exemplary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I say change your mindset, change your reality, right? And Bob Marley said emancipate yourself from mental slavery.
Yes.
And I feel that change begins with us, no? If it's to be, it's up to me, so to speak, no? And I think that we each are responsible for creating our own realities. Yes, my situation might be one of poverty or whatever the case might be, but I won't change my situation if I am blaming the system or everybody else for the situation that exists. It is up to me to change my reality, right? And in that sense, change begins with us, no? But at the same time, we are a community, right? And I have seen through the work that I have done, especially in the rural communities and districts, that community-based organizations have been able to raise a lot of resources and create sustainable livelihood, attract money, working as groups, right, and going into enterprise, right? I don't know that we have done that effectively in Belize City, maybe because the leadership isn't there, although I think recently there has been talk about social enterprise and helping people, you know, but still I think if you have more of these groups coming together, perhaps what is needed maybe are the facilitators, you know, people who could guide and help groups, you know, to develop plans that could attract resources, right? But I think that is necessary, you know. Also, I just wanted to say, when it comes to the crime and violence, right, that in terms of changing mindset, and it's something that really, you know, it sticks in my mind, right, is when you look, and let me preface it with this if you don't mind, right? Some years ago at SPEAR, we were doing some work along with the Women Issues Network in analyzing the national budget and how it impacts women, right? And one of the things that we were looking at was the economic contribution that housewives were making to the economy, because it wasn't quantified and it wasn't reflected in the budget then, the value, the economic value that housewives give, because they work, they give time, they, you know. Well, if we use that same concept, right, and in terms of crime and violence, looking at the first biblical account of the first murder that ever occurred in the world, right, when Cain murdered his brother Abel, God asked, right, and he didn't have to ask because he knew, right, but he asked, hey, Cain, where's your brother, right? Of course, God always want to give you a chance to confess and then repent, right? But Cain said, am I my brother's keeper, right? And then God told him, you know, the bloods are crying out from the ground, right? Now it's interesting, right? He didn't say the blood of your brother is crying from the ground. He said the bloods. Why? Because only one man died, but 4 generations with him. Because Abel would not have a son, grandson, great-grandson, etc., right? So if we look at it from that point of view, right, we are killing generations. We are actually perpetuating an ethnic cleansing, right?
Against our own.
Against our own, right? Because every man that is killed is potentially 4 generations at one, right? And if we see it in that context and we see it in terms of the economic, the potential economic value, right, in the future generations, maybe if it's only to change the mindset, right, because it's a losing game, right? To me, it's a losing game. Even for El Chapo, it was a losing game, right? So, you know, I think we need to kind of say the realities in that, no, and hopefully, you know, we could change it.
It's not them, it's us.
Right.
I also want to bring a gender perspective also to this conversation, because I think if we would change our mindsets in terms of the boxing of what makes a man and what makes a woman, what makes a boy and what makes a girl, instead of building whole human beings. That means whatever are the characteristic features we think should be assigned or aligned to males, that we ensure that females have those same characteristic traits and vice versa. You would have a whole being, a person with compassion but also strength, a person with skills in and outside of a household, a person who can be safe but also can have fun, can be affectionate, can be loving. We want full, complete human beings, and we want to be able to recognize the potential in every human being in Belize, whether they are male or female. If we continue to limit what females can do and what males can do, that is how we end up with the kind of violence that we have. Violence on the streets and violence in the homes, because many of our children, too many of our children, and for generations, have been victims of sexual exploitation. That continues to be a problem in this country. Then when we look at the higher level, because people think that GBV, gender-based violence, is something that only happens in the home. Well, domestic violence is only a component of gender-based violence. But if you look at what happened between Minister Finnegan and Minister Dolores Balaramos Garcia, that is gender-based violence. Also, at that very high level, where because males see themselves in one particular way and think that they have a right or it's okay to put females in a particular in their place, then it's okay. We can't continue to be like that as a society. That will not be good for us any at all, because we want that when we have leadership, whether they're male or female, that they are exemplary leaders, that they are of good character.
Yes.
That's what we have to aspire for, that and demand that. And if the persons are not of good character, they do not belong in those positions any at all. Any at all. So those are the things we really have to look at. It's not pleasant to look at, but let's look at it and deal with it, because if we're going to go forward and grow old gracefully, we have to fix the problems that we have right now.
Look in the mirror.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to end with two things. Lead where you are. So the question of where the leadership comes from, it comes from us individually. Aspire to know as much as you can and lead where you are in whatever field you are. And two, each one teach one. So you cannot teach what you don't know. So try to know and then teach. And teaching happens in many ways. And then that creates the awareness, the empowerment that moves a society forward bit by bit and so on. No?
All right. Well, thank you for being here this morning and sharing in this conversation, having a very candid conversation that is about confronting challenges, celebrating triumph, and renewing our resolve. Belize at 36. Thank you very much once again.
You're very welcome.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we will continue in a similar trend with a conversation on nationalism and patriotism and the church's role. So stay tuned.